There is a strange kind of exhaustion that no amount of sleep can fix. It's not the tiredness that comes after physical labor or a long day's work. It's deeper, quieter, and far more insidious. It's the fatigue that creeps in after a conversation, the heaviness that follows a phone call, the inexplicable emptiness that lingers after spending time with certain people. You might wake up feeling fine, grounded, even optimistic, and then after just a few minutes in the presence of someone, a colleague, a friend, a relative, your vitality begins to leak away. You feel confused, agitated, maybe even guilty, as if you've carried something heavy that wasn't yours to bear. Modern language has found a label for this phenomenon: toxic people. Others call them energy vampires. It's a catchy metaphor, one that offers a simple story. They drain you, you must protect yourself, and so we look outward. We block, we avoid, we distance, we visualize white light around us. We repeat affirmations and set boundaries, and yet, somehow, the same pattern repeats. New faces, new names, same fatigue. It is here that Carl Gustav Jung, Swiss psychiatrist, pioneer of depth psychology, and one of the greatest explorers of the human psyche, offers a radically different perspective. Jung suggests that what drains us is not out there. It is not something that people do to us. It is something that happens within us, silently, unconsciously, and inevitably, until we learn to see it. According to Jung, this experience is the result of a process he called psychic contamination, an invisible fusion between our emotional world and that of another. When this occurs, the unprocessed wounds, fears, and complexes of another person resonate with the same unhealed parts within ourselves. We do not merely absorb their energy, we awaken what is already dormant inside us. This is why the same dynamic follows us from one relationship to the next. It is not because the world is full of energy thieves, though it is. It is because part of us is inviting the theft, unconsciously recreating the same emotional scenario in which we once learned to survive. Many of us were conditioned early in life to equate love with sacrifice. As children, we learned that being good meant taking care of others, absorbing their pain, solving their problems, even if they never asked us to. And so as adults, we wear these invisible roles like second skins: the savior, the caretaker, the mediator, the rescuer. We confuse compassion with self-erasure. We call it empathy when in truth it is fusion. And in this fusion, we lose ourselves. But Jung's insight is not meant to condemn us. It is meant to awaken us, to show that true protection is not about walls or rituals or distance. It is about consciousness. Because the people who drain us are more than just irritants. They are mirrors. They reveal the hidden parts of ourselves we have not yet faced. Our guilt, our fear of rejection, our hunger to be needed, our terror of being alone. They show us the shadow we have spent a lifetime trying to deny. To reclaim our energy, we must stop fighting the shadows cast by others and begin to explore the darkness within ourselves. We must learn to see the psychological mechanisms that leave us open and vulnerable, the inferior function of the psyche, the blind spot through which emotional manipulation enters. We must illuminate what we have left unexamined. In the sections that follow, we will go far deeper into Jung's view of this hidden dynamic. We will explore why some people seem to drain us without mercy, how our own unconscious colludes in the process, and what we can do to build an inner life so whole, so self-sufficient, that no one, no matter how chaotic, needy, or manipulative, can touch our center. Because, as Jung wrote, no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And when you do, something remarkable happens. The people who once drained you will no longer even see you. They will walk right past, searching for a frequency you no longer emit. And you, finally, will stand in the stillness of your own power, untouchable, unshaken, whole. Most people believe that the exhaustion they feel after certain encounters is caused by something external, the negativity of another person, their manipulative behavior, or their chaotic emotional state. And while these elements play a part, Carl Gustav Jung believed they are not the true source of the problem. They are merely triggers for something far deeper, a hidden dynamic taking place inside the psyche. Jung called this phenomenon psychic contamination, an unconscious fusion of emotional fields between two people. It's not something you choose or consent to. It happens silently, beneath the threshold of awareness, when the unresolved material of another person, their guilt, shame, fear, or dependency, resonates with something similar inside you. Like tuning forks vibrating at the same frequency, your unhealed wounds respond to theirs. This is why certain people seem to drain you, while others do not. It's not simply that they are more toxic. It's that they activate something dormant, a complex, a wound, a pattern that already exists within your own psyche. And once that resonance is triggered, the boundary between their emotional state and yours begins to blur. You start to feel sadness that isn't yours, anxiety that doesn't belong to you, guilt with no clear source, and yet it feels deeply personal. This process often begins in childhood. If you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where you were rewarded for being helpful, obedient, or emotionally available, your psyche learned that connection is earned by carrying the emotional burdens of others. Children in such circumstances become hyper-attuned to the feelings of their parents, siblings, or caregivers. They develop a radar for distress, and over time they internalize a powerful belief: I am loved when I am useful, I am worthy when I am needed. This belief doesn't disappear with age, it mutates. In adulthood, it manifests as a compulsion to fix people, even when they haven't asked for help. It drives you to overextend yourself, to listen endlessly to complaints, to absorb pain that is not yours to heal. And when you inevitably feel exhausted, you mistake the symptom, emotional drainage, for the cause, a deep unconscious drive to seek love through self-erasure. But Jung went even deeper. He believed this vulnerability is rooted in what he called the inferior function, the weakest, least developed aspect of the psyche. To understand this, we must look at Jung's model of the four psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuition. Each of us has a dominant function, the one we rely on most to interpret and interact with the world. But just as one muscle grows stronger with use, another remains underdeveloped. That neglected function becomes our blind spot, impulsive, unstable, and easily manipulated. It is through this psychological crack that psychic contamination enters. Consider a person whose dominant function is thinking. They are analytical, logical, detached. Their inferior function is feeling. Because they are less skilled at processing emotions, they are particularly vulnerable to emotional manipulation. A dramatic, needy, or guilt-inducing person slips effortlessly into that gap, activating feelings the thinking type cannot easily understand or regulate. Confusion, exhaustion, and emotional overwhelm follow. Now imagine the reverse: a person with dominant feeling and inferior thinking. They are deeply attuned to emotion, but struggle with logic and rational boundaries. A manipulator who uses twisted arguments or intellectual justifications can bypass their emotional radar entirely, leaving them unsure of what is real or reasonable, and once again drained. This vulnerability is not limited to any single function. It is universal. The inferior function, whatever form it takes, is the doorway through which others' unresolved material enters our psyche, and most importantly, it remains open precisely because we refuse to acknowledge it. We avoid it, neglect it, pretend it isn't there, and in doing so, we leave ourselves exposed. Jung described the inferior function as a semi-open door between the conscious and unconscious, a thin membrane through which foreign psychic contents can pass unnoticed. If we do not develop it, we remain perpetually susceptible to contamination, but if we bring it into awareness, if we learn to integrate and strengthen this weakest part of ourselves, that door slowly closes. Manipulation loses its grip. Emotional chaos cannot penetrate. This is why Jung rejected superficial strategies like visualizing protective light or cutting ties with toxic people. Such techniques may offer temporary relief, but they do nothing to address the internal weakness that makes us vulnerable in the first place. Real protection, he argued, comes only from inner development, from strengthening the very part of ourselves we would rather ignore. The inferior function is not just a psychological curiosity, it is the foundation upon which emotional autonomy is built. As long as it remains unconscious, you will find yourself caught in the same draining patterns again and again, no matter how many boundaries you set or how many people you cut out of your life. But once you begin to confront and cultivate it, the dynamics shift. The same behaviors that once overwhelmed you lose their power. The same manipulations that once confused you become transparent. In short, the draining stops not because the world changes, but because you do. But there is still a deeper layer to this story, one that lies beyond the inferior function. Because even as we develop and integrate the neglected parts of ourselves, there remains another source of vulnerability, the shadow, the vast reservoir of everything within us that we deny, repress, and refuse to see. And it is in the shadow's darkness that some of the most subtle and powerful forms of energy drain occur. In the next section, we will enter that territory. We will explore how the shadow operates, why it attaches itself to the people who exhaust us most, and how confronting it face to face is the key to breaking the cycle once and for all. When Carl Gustav Jung spoke of the shadow, he wasn't referring to something sinister lurking in the darkness, not in the way myths and religions speak of evil. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is far more intimate and unsettling. It is composed of everything within us that we refuse to see, everything we reject, repress, deny, or deem unacceptable about ourselves. It is the other half of our nature, our forgotten anger, unacknowledged envy, disguised manipulativeness, secret fears, forbidden desires, unclaimed strength. It is the me that lives beneath the mask of who we think we are. And this, Jung warned, is where some of the most powerful energy-draining dynamics originate. Most people believe that draining individuals exhaust them simply because they are demanding or manipulative. But Jung saw something much deeper at play. Often the people who disturb us the most are those who mirror the parts of ourselves we are unwilling to confront. The emotional fatigue we feel is not just the cost of dealing with their behavior, it is the psychic effort of resisting what they reveal about us. Think of a colleague whose arrogance infuriates you. On the surface, the irritation seems justified. They are conceited, self-important, intolerable. But beneath that reaction lies a deeper question. Why does their arrogance affect you so intensely? Perhaps it touches a buried truth, your own fear of asserting yourself, your own shame around power, your own unacknowledged desire to be seen. Or consider the manipulative friend who constantly plays the victim. You feel exhausted every time they speak, suffocated by their emotional games. But ask yourself, are you perhaps seeing an external reflection of your own subtle manipulations, the ways you've sought love by appearing helpless, the ways you've controlled others by appealing to their sympathy? This is the paradox of the shadow. The more we deny it, the more powerfully it controls our lives, and the more violently it projects itself onto others. Projection is one of the psyche's oldest defense mechanisms. It is the mind's way of offloading what it cannot accept about itself. When we reject a part of ourselves, we do not destroy it, we simply lose conscious contact with it. But the rejected material remains active in the unconscious, and like a magnet, it seeks expression in the outer world. It clings to people, attaches itself to situations, and reappears in the very traits we condemn in others. This is why Jung famously said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The draining people in our lives are not merely obstacles to be avoided. They are psychological mirrors, showing us sometimes painfully, always truthfully, the aspects of ourselves we have yet to integrate. And here lies a deeper source of exhaustion. When you interact with someone who mirrors your shadow, you are not just dealing with them, you are battling yourself. You are fighting to maintain a self-image, to uphold the illusion of being good, strong, selfless, or innocent. And this inner war consumes enormous amounts of psychic energy. The effort to suppress and deny is what drains you. This is why chronic fatigue, diffuse anxiety, unexplained guilt, or persistent emptiness often accompany relationships that trigger the shadow. It's not just the other person's presence that wears you down. It's the constant unconscious labor of repressing the parts of yourself they awaken. And yet, as painful as this is, Jung believed it was also profoundly valuable, because every time someone triggers you, they hand you a map, a direct route to the parts of yourself that require healing. The question is whether you will follow it. This journey begins with a radical shift in perception. Instead of asking, why is this person doing this to me, you begin to ask, what does this person reveal about me? Instead of blaming others for draining you, you examine what inner conflicts they illuminate. This work is not easy. It requires courage to see the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime hiding. It demands humility to admit that the manipulative tendencies you despise in others also live within you. It requires honesty to recognize that the arrogance you condemn might be a distorted reflection of your own unclaimed confidence. But this is the path to liberation, because the moment you reclaim what you've projected, the projection dissolves. The person who once irritated you no longer has power. The behavior that once drained you no longer resonates. The external trigger loses its grip because the internal wound has been integrated. And here we begin to see a profound truth. The greatest energy drain in life is not what others take from us, but what we withhold from ourselves. The more parts of yourself you reject, the more energy you spend keeping them in the dark. The more you integrate them, the more energy becomes available for creativity, purpose, and authentic connection. Jung often described this process as an act of withdrawing projections. It is one of the hardest tasks on the path of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole. but it is also one of the most transformative, because once you stop scattering your psychic energy across a landscape of enemies, rivals, and toxic people, you discover something extraordinary. The world grows quieter, the drama fades. The people who once drained you no longer penetrate your inner space. This is not because they have changed, it's because you have. Yet Jung's work does not stop here. He knew that seeing and integrating the shadow was only part of the solution. There is still a deeper and more demanding task, one that requires confronting the very inertia of our psyche itself. Because even after we become aware of our wounds, our projections, and our vulnerabilities, we are still drawn to repeat the same patterns. We still cling to the roles and habits that once made us feel safe. To break free from that cycle, Jung proposed a concept he called opus contra naturam, the work against nature. It is the deliberate, conscious effort to go against the automatic patterns of our psyche, and it is the only path to true psychological freedom. In the next section, we will explore this alchemical work in depth. We will examine why breaking our unconscious habits is so difficult, why it is essential to lasting transformation, and how through this inner struggle, we can finally become immune to emotional manipulation, not because we resist it, but because it no longer finds a home within us. There is a reason why most people remain stuck in the same draining cycles, attracting similar relationships, repeating familiar emotional scripts, falling into the same exhausting roles over and over again. It is not because they are weak, or naive, or cursed with bad luck. It is because the psyche, by its very nature, prefers what is familiar. It clings to what it knows, even if what it knows is harmful. Carl Gustav Jung called this inertia natura, the automatic tendency of the psyche to preserve its habitual patterns. And he believed that breaking free from these patterns required a very different kind of effort, one that runs against the current of our nature itself. He called this process opus contra natura, the work against nature. This is not a poetic metaphor, it is the heart of psychological transformation. It means doing the thing that every fiber of your unconscious resists. It means dismantling the roles that once kept you safe. It means confronting the very instincts that once ensured your emotional survival, and refusing to let them dictate your present. To understand this, consider the caretaker who has spent a lifetime absorbing the pain of others. This person learned, perhaps as a child, that love was earned through service, that affection was conditional upon sacrifice. This belief is now woven into the fabric of their identity. To stop rescuing people feels selfish. To say no feels cruel. To set a boundary feels like a betrayal. And yet, if they wish to reclaim their energy, they must do precisely those things. This is opus contra naturam, the deliberate choice to walk into discomfort rather than away from it. Or think of the intellectual, who has always taken refuge in the safety of reason. They fear emotion, mistrust vulnerability, and hide behind analysis. Their inferior function feeling is a door through which others' chaos enters. To close it, they must do the unthinkable, immerse themselves in the raw, messy world of emotion. They must learn to feel deeply, to cry, to rage, to love, even if it terrifies them. This is opus contra naturam, the decision to cultivate the very part of oneself that feels most alien. The same applies to the compulsive people-pleaser who cannot tolerate rejection. Their entire sense of worth depends on being liked. They say yes when they want to say no. They bend, contort, and sacrifice themselves to avoid disapproval. Their work against nature is to embrace rejection, to disappoint others, to risk being disliked, to stand firm in their boundaries, even when it costs them approval. At first, this process feels like dying, and in a sense it is. It is the death of the false self, the persona we constructed to keep ourselves safe. It is the dismantling of the unconscious strategies that once served us but now enslave us. This inner work is profoundly uncomfortable because it brings us face to face with our deepest fears, the fear of abandonment, the fear of inadequacy, the fear of losing control. And yet it is precisely this discomfort that signals transformation. As Jung often reminded his students, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The alchemists, whose language Jung often borrowed, described their work as a nigredo, a blackening, a dissolution, a necessary descent before the gold could be forged. In the same way, opus contra naturam is not about immediate relief or superficial positivity. It is about breaking down everything that is false so that something real, something whole, can emerge. Every time you refuse to repeat an unconscious pattern, you reclaim a piece of your energy. Every time you choose awareness over autopilot, you strengthen your psychic boundaries. Every time you confront a fear instead of avoiding it, you make the unconscious conscious. This is not a single act, but a lifelong discipline, and it is not grand gestures that transform us, but small, deliberate acts of resistance repeated day after day. The compulsive helper saying, "No, I cannot do that for you." The emotionally avoidant person choosing to express vulnerability. The victim choosing responsibility over blame. Each of these moments is a subtle rebellion against the inertia of the psyche, and with each rebellion, the psyche reorganizes itself. And here is where the most profound shift occurs. As you engage in this inner alchemy, the dynamics of your outer life begin to change in ways that feel almost magical. The people who once drained you lose their grip. The patterns that once repeated themselves dissolve. The roles you once played no longer make sense. It is not because the world has changed, but because you are no longer the same participant in its dramas. Energy drain stops not because you build higher walls, but because there is nothing left for others to hook into. You stop radiating the signals of guilt, need, and fear. You no longer offer the unconscious invitations that manipulators once responded to. You become, in a sense, invisible to those dynamics, not by hiding, but by transcending the frequency they require to function. And yet this transformation is not simply about defense, it is about liberation. It is about reclaiming the energy you once scattered across people, patterns, and projections, and using it to build a life that is truly yours. But even this deep inner work is incomplete without practical integration. Awareness and transformation must eventually express themselves in concrete choices, daily practices, and new ways of relating. Otherwise, they remain ideas, noble but inert. In the next section, we will explore how to bring all of Jung's insights into lived reality. We will look at the practical steps, the daily disciplines that strengthen the psyche, close the doors of contamination, and make emotional self-sufficiency not just an ideal, but a way of being. Because in the end, true energetic protection is not a shield, it is a structure, a self built so consciously, so completely, that nothing external can enter without your permission. It is one thing to understand why you feel drained. It is another to transform that understanding into a lived reality, a way of being in which your energy is no longer hostage to the moods, demands, and manipulations of others. Carl Gustav Jung was always clear: insight alone is never enough. Awareness is the beginning, not the destination. The work of individuation, of becoming whole, must eventually pass from the realm of theory into the arena of daily life. And so we arrive at the most practical and perhaps the most demanding part of this journey, learning how to live from a place of inner strength. How do we close the doors through which psychic contamination enters? How do we cultivate the kind of psychological structure that leaves no space for manipulation? How do we build a life where our energy belongs to us and us alone? The process is not complicated, but it requires consistency and courage. Jung called this ongoing labor the opus, the daily deliberate shaping of the self. Below are the pillars of that work. 1 day, develop awareness of automatic patterns. The first step is to catch yourself in the act. Most draining dynamics are rooted in unconscious behavior, the compulsion to help, the reflex to please, the instinct to fix. These responses are so habitual that we often enact them before we even realize it. Begin by observing yourself in interactions. Notice when you feel an urgent need to solve someone else's problem. Pay attention to the impulse to say yes when you want to say no. Become aware of the subtle ways you seek validation or fear disapproval. Self-observation is not about judgment, it is about illumination. As Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Awareness transforms fate into choice. 2. Question your motivation. Every time you step into the role of helper, rescuer, or caretaker, pause and ask, why am I doing this? Is this act truly helpful to the other person, or is it serving an unconscious need in me? The need to feel necessary, worthy, or loved. This small moment of questioning is powerful. It cuts through the illusion of altruism and reveals the deeper motives beneath your behavior. It gives you a chance to choose differently, to act from awareness rather than compulsion. And often, that choice will be uncomfortable. You may feel guilt, shame, or fear. That is normal. It means you are interrupting a lifelong pattern. Stay with the discomfort. It is a sign that change is occurring. Perhaps the most powerful tool of psychological self-sufficiency is the simple, firm, unapologetic no. For those conditioned to seek love through service, saying no can feel like a betrayal of others, of oneself, of an identity carefully constructed over decades. But this is exactly why it is so essential. Every no is a declaration of self-ownership. It is a refusal to participate in dynamics that drain you. It is a reminder to both yourself and others that your energy is not a limitless resource. Start small if you must. Decline minor requests that you would have automatically accepted. Let silence follow manipulative appeals. Set boundaries with kindness, but with unwavering clarity. With time, no will cease to feel like selfishness and begin to feel like self-respect. As Jung taught, the inferior function, the least developed aspect of your psyche, is the gateway through which manipulation often enters. Closing that gateway means consciously cultivating the very capacities you have neglected. If you are overly rational, Practice naming and expressing your feelings. If you are highly emotional, challenge yourself to think critically and objectively. If you live in ideas and abstractions, anchor yourself in physical action and sensory reality. If you rely solely on instinct, practice deliberate analysis and reflection. This work will feel awkward, even humiliating at first, but every effort builds resilience. Every small expansion of your weakest function strengthens the psychic structure that keeps your energy intact. 5. Engage in radical self-reflection. The people who drain you are not just obstacles, they are messengers. Each draining interaction contains information about what remains unintegrated within you. Use them as mirrors. After an encounter that leaves you exhausted, ask yourself, what was triggered in me? What emotion surfaced? What belief was activated? What part of me was reflected in the other person's behavior? These questions are not rhetorical, they are maps to your shadow, and following them leads directly to the areas where healing is most needed. With time, the very people who once depleted you become catalysts for your growth. Cultivate solitude and self-containment. One of the most overlooked elements of psychological self-sufficiency is the ability to be alone, not in isolation, but in fullness. Many people overextend themselves because they are terrified of emptiness. They seek constant validation, distraction, or connection to avoid confronting their own inner void. Learning to enjoy your own company changes everything. It breaks the compulsive need to seek completion in others. It teaches you that your presence is enough, and when you are nourished by your own solitude, parasitic relationships simply lose their appeal. Solitude also deepens self-knowledge. In silence, the psyche reveals its hidden layers. Old wounds rise to the surface, forgotten desires emerge, and in that awareness, the power of unconscious patterns begins to fade. 7. Reframe boundaries as acts of love. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls meant to keep people out. In truth, they are bridges, structures that make genuine connection possible. When you set a boundary, you are not rejecting the other person, you are honoring both them and yourself by defining the terms under which authentic relationship can exist. Healthy boundaries also teach others how to relate to you. They communicate that you will not participate in dynamics of manipulation or dependency. They model self-respect, and often they inspire it in those around you. 8. Recognize when it's time to let go. Not every relationship is meant to be salvaged. Some dynamics are so deeply rooted in manipulation or dependency that the healthiest choice is to walk away. This is not failure, it is discernment. It is the recognition that your energy is sacred, and that not everyone has earned access to it. Letting go can be painful, especially if the relationship is long-standing, but it is often the final step in reclaiming your energy, and the first step toward building a life anchored in self-respect and peace. At its core, psychological self-sufficiency is about reclaiming authorship of your inner life. It means no longer outsourcing your worth, your stability, or your happiness to the unpredictable behaviors of others. It means learning to draw from the well of your own wholeness, rather than the approval of the outside world. And here lies the paradox. When you stop needing others to fill your emptiness, you become far more capable of loving them freely. When you no longer require their validation, you can offer your presence without expectation. Relationships cease to be battlegrounds for control or arenas of unconscious projection. They become spaces of genuine meeting. This is the quiet power that Jung hinted at, the power of a person who is inwardly whole. It is a presence that cannot be manipulated, a soul that cannot be drained, a life that is no longer shaped by invisible wounds. In the next and final section, we will explore what happens when this work is complete, when you have integrated the shadow, strengthened the inferior function, and broken the unconscious patterns that once held you captive. We will see how the people and situations that once drained you lose their power entirely, and how in their place arises a peace that no one can disturb. When you have walked this path, when you have confronted your shadow, strengthened your inferior function, and broken free from the roles that once defined you, something profound and irreversible begins to unfold. The world does not change, but your experience of it does. The people who once drained you no longer hold power. Their words no longer pierce. Their dramas no longer pull you in. Their demands no longer reach the core of who you are. In fact, many of them will quietly drift out of your life, not because of conflict, but because they no longer recognize the version of you that once sustained them. You stop emitting the silent signals of need, guilt, and fear that once drew manipulative personalities to you. You stop playing the unconscious games that kept you entangled in other people's wounds. You stop seeking love by sacrificing yourself, and in doing so, you stop attracting relationships built on imbalance. What remains is peace, a quiet, steady power that arises not from control or defense, but from wholeness. You become someone who cannot be drained because there is nothing left for others to take. Your energy belongs to you. Your emotions belong to you. Your life belongs to you. And perhaps most importantly, you realize that protection was never about building walls, it was about building yourself. If this message resonated with you, don't let it end here. Begin the work today, even in the smallest way. Set one boundary, question one impulse, spend 1 hour in solitude. Each small act brings you closer to the version of yourself that no one can manipulate, drain, or control. Share in the comments what part of this journey spoke to you most deeply. Your reflection might be the light someone else needs to begin their own. And if you're ready to go further into Jung's teachings and the path of individuation, subscribe to this channel and explore our other videos. Together we'll keep diving into the hidden architecture of the psyche and step by step, reclaim the power that was always yours.